Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Hello and welcome. My name is Ayub Razik. I will be the moderator for today's press conference hosted by the U.S. Council of Muslim Organizations and organized by Free Uyghur Now. I'd like to begin by introducing our first speaker, USCMO Secretary General, Mr. Usama Jamal.
Thank you, Ayub. On behalf of the U.S. Council of Muslim Organizations, I would like to welcome everyone on this day, all our speakers and all the attendees who are joining us today in support of the Uyghurs Muslims. Today, we are choosing this time to be at the same time of the Human Rights Day around the world. And I want to also take this opportunity and applaud the Free Uyghurs Now youth group who organized this event. And I believe this shows the international support for the Muslim in China. And for our youth to take this initiative is truly a great move that shows that people around the world, especially the young ones, do care about what's happening to Muslims around the world, especially the Uyghurs. Now, today we are asking the Organization of Islamic Countries to break their silence that they have been exercising for quite some time over the issue of the Uyghurs in China. Unfortunately, instead of condemning the Chinese government for the mistreatment and the gross violation of the Uyghurs' human rights, civil rights, and religious rights, they have endorsed a letter that commended the Chinese government for the treatment of the Uyghurs. And so today is the day that we are raising our voice and sending a message to OIC and the member countries that they have to take a stronger position and a stand against the Chinese government, leverage their economic power with China to make sure that the Chinese government deal with the Uyghurs in China in a humane and an equal right as the rest of the Chinese people. With that, I would like to turn it over to the organizer of this event, the Free Uyghurs Now, the student organizations. And I believe Sister Amal will take it from here.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Brother Osama. Thank you, Ayub. And thank you to all of our distinguished guests for joining us today. Emma and I are the co-executive directors of Free Uyghur Now, the largest youth-led grassroots movement advocating for Uyghur brothers and sisters. We'd like to extend our sincerest thanks to the U.S. Council of Muslim Organizations for hosting this press conference for all of us today. And we'd like to thank all of our allied co-sponsors, organizations, and individuals for their passionate concern and tireless efforts in ending the plight of the Uyghur people. Over 140 organizations in 25 countries across the globe are united under this mission of Free Uyghur Now. We stand here today representing the global concern over China's persecution of Uyghur and Turkic people, and to end the silence of Muslim majority nations on the crimes against humanity and genocide in the Uyghur homeland. We cannot be bystanders to such injustices.
The international community is here because our fellow human beings are arbitrarily detained, tortured, and exploited to work for the profit of global brands. We are here because Muslims are attacked and terrorized as a result of their religion being criminalized. We are here because, unlike you and I, Uyghurs are separated from their families with no knowledge of when they'll see them next. We are here because there's an organized and concerted effort to eradicate a people by forced sterilization, abortions, by genocide.
A genocide of Muslims, while there is an overwhelming amount of evidence of the oppression they face, is not only a failure to defend basic human dignity, but a failure on behalf of global Muslim leadership. Since news of China's abhorrent and relentless, unprecedented persecution of the Uyghur and other Turkic groups emerged, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation has remained largely silent, even going as far as to commend China for its efforts in providing care to its Muslim citizens. We believe that the founding principles of OIC are principles that defend human rights and the rights of Muslim minorities, and we are not willing to give up on the multinational platform that is meant to represent and unite all Muslims. As an international body which endeavors to safeguard and protect the interests of the Muslim world, the OIC has a religious and moral obligation to condemn atrocities, not support them, and to advocate for the rights of Muslims all over the world, including the millions of Uyghurs and other Turkic people suffering grave human rights abuses in their own homeland.
We are calling on the OIC and its member states to join the international community in condemning China and demanding accountability for the abuses against Uyghur Muslims highlighted in our statement. Specifically, we call on the OIC to 1. Uphold its charter, which states in part that members will preserve and promote lofty Islamic values of peace, compassion, tolerance, equality, justice, and human dignity, and to enhance and strengthen the bond of unity and solidarity among the Muslim peoples. 2. Unequivocally condemn China for its crimes against the Uyghur and Turkic Muslims. 3. Cease engagement with the Chinese government's propaganda that is meant to whitewash its human rights violations against Uyghurs. 4. Provide refuge and protection for Uyghur refugees. And 5. Supports UN and other independent international investigative efforts to force China to comply with international human rights obligations. As mentioned in the Quran in Surah An-Nisa, O you who believe, stand out firmly for justice as witnesses to Allah, even as against yourselves or your parents or your kin, and whether it be against rich or poor, for Allah can best protect both. Muslims are called on to stand for justice and to support those who are oppressed, regardless of how rich and mighty their oppressors may be. We urge the OIC to stand firm on these Islamic principles.
From Canada to Malaysia, Muslim activist organizations and human rights defenders are standing firmly against the silence of the OIC and stand with you, our Uyghur brothers and sisters. The realities we face remain difficult, but the collective spirit and action of the Muslim Ummah, alongside renewed efforts by the OIC, will bring a swift end to these injustices, inshallah. Again, thank you all for being here today and for standing for the Uyghurs.
Thank you, Sister Tasneem and Sister Emel. I'd like to take this moment to remind our attendees to feel free to submit any questions into the chat box, which we will answer in the Q&A period following remarks by our guest speakers. I would now like to introduce a U.S. Muslim scholar and Imam, Sheikh Omar Sulaiman.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wa rasulullah wa alihi wa sahbihi man wala. I have no prepared statement except for the open letter that has been written, and I endorse every word of that open letter because I think that the Uyghurs often are suffocated in their voice, and so we lend our voice to theirs with every single demand that they are making of the OIC and every single demand that they're making of the Muslim governments that have not only shamefully remained on the sidelines, but actually actively aided the oppressor of our Uyghur brothers and sisters. When it comes to the OIC, I just want to take us back to when the United Nations had a letter that was submitted by, I believe, 22 nations. I think all of them were non-Muslim nations in support of our Uyghur brothers and sisters, only to be met with a response of another letter with 37 nations, predominantly Muslim nations, that actually supported Chinese propaganda to maintain the oppression of our Uyghur brothers and sisters. We are witnessing now a situation where global Islamophobia is spiraling out of control and countries are learning from one another different tactics and how to persecute Muslims. There is no persecution more egregious than the persecution of our Uyghur brothers and sisters at this scale and with this level of shamelessness and with this little accountability. We are seeing how trends spread from China to Myanmar, from India to Sri Lanka, and across the world, how different forms of oppression of Muslim populations are tied. We're witnessing now the rise of the oppression of Muslims in France, And of course, it's important to mention here the way that the normalization of Muslim governments with the Israeli government serves as an active aid of the oppression of the Palestinian people and the erasure of the Palestinian people. And so we're seeing now how Muslim governments can, not only not be in support of large-scale oppression of Muslim minorities, but actually actively aid in the oppression of those Muslim minorities. And so when it comes to the Uyghur example, I want to put this forward that it's very clear that China has an economic chokehold on the Muslim world and has been able to isolate every Muslim country in fear of even paying lip service to the Uyghur cause, whereas some Muslim countries will pay lip service to causes like the Palestinian cause, but not actively support them. In the case of the Uyghurs, you have some Muslim countries that might flirt with the idea that the Chinese narrative on the Uyghurs is not appropriate, and at the same time carry out deplorable policies with Uyghur refugees and continue to aid in the oppression of the Uyghurs. So I'll end with this. With the OIC, you have the second largest intergovernmental organization in the world, and you have the largest intergovernmental Muslim cooperation in the world. If the largest Muslim intergovernmental cooperation in the world cannot stand up against the largest genocide of Muslims in the world, then what is the point of this body? And if you cannot aid the oppressed against their oppressor, then at least do not stand with the oppressor by reaffirming their propaganda to the world and actively taking part in the oppression of your brothers and sisters. And so our demand is more than that. Our demand is that you come together so that Muslim countries don't have to be in fear due to the economic chokehold on the Muslim world. And with one collective voice, stand for our Uyghur brothers and sisters and for Muslim minorities around the world that are being persecuted in like manner and that are watching the way that China is getting away with this, with the stamp of approval of the OIC and other large international Muslim bodies. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Thank you, Sheikh Omar. I'd like to now introduce a member of the Canadian House of Commons, the Honorable Heather McPherson.
Thank you so much, and thank you for allowing me to join you today. My name is Heather McPherson. I am the Member of Parliament for Edmonton Strathcona. I am a representative from the New Democratic Party. I sit on the International Human Rights Subcommittee with the Canadian government. I'm also the Deputy Foreign Affairs Critic, so I have a role to play in that as well. As part of the International Human Rights Subcommittee, I just wanted to share very quickly some of our thoughts on the genocide that is happening in China against the Uyghur people. As many of you will know, on October 21st this year, we did release a statement that we do, and I will read it to you, but it says that the international community, if the international community does not condemn the human rights abuses in Xinjiang province by the government of China, a precedent will be set and these methods will be adopted by other regimes. Complacency is entrenched by a lack of access to Xinjiang and by lack of free press and through the silencing and harassment of Uyghurs living abroad. So as you can see from our statement, we unequivocally have condemned the persecution of the Uyghurs and other Turkic Muslims in Xinjiang by the government of China, and based on the evidence put forward during the subcommittee hearings, both in 2018 and 2020, the subcommittee is persuaded that the actions of the Chinese Communist Party constitute genocide as laid out in the Genocide Convention. This is very important to have Canada declare this genocide because it gives us the tools that we need within our parliament to hold the government of China to account. We urge the government of Canada to work with our allies to ensure that the government of China is brought back into international law. We will be pushing to work with our allies to have the Magnitsky sanctions put in place. And I will be bringing forward legislation in the new year looking at the impacts of slave trade and slave labor on our supply chains and the need for Canada, both as a government and as both as a country with organizations working in supply chains that are impacted, and as an institution of itself, we'll be pushing to make sure that slave labor is taken out of our supply chains and that we are holding China to account as we go forward. Thank you very much for the important work that you do. Thank you for allowing me to come on and speak. If there's anything that I can do to help, I would encourage you to reach out to me at any time. This is important work, and it's important that we stand together.
Thank you very much to the Honorable Member McPherson. I'd like to introduce now the President of the World Uyghur Congress, Mr. Dulkan Isa.
Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers and sisters. I would like to thank U.S. Council of Muslim Organization and the Free Uyghurs now for organizing this press conference and inviting me to speak. I applaud this organization's hard work and the campaign to end the Uyghur genocide. Current situation of the Uyghurs people has worsened dramatically over the recent years as a result of the targeted campaign by the Chinese government. Uyghur Muslim community has suffered incredible as their very existence has come under threat. In the last 4 years, alone Chinese government has mass arbitrary detention more than 3 million innocent Uyghurs in the concentration camps, the largest such a detention since the Second World War. Mass sterilization of Uyghur women and other forced birth prevention measures in order to diminish those Uyghur Muslims. Forced labor, modern slavery of 10,000, 10 and 100 of the thousand of Uyghurs. Attempt to destroy unique Uyghur identity and to forcibly assimilated Uyghur people. Destruction, physical representation of the Uyghur identity, including thousands of mosques, graveyards, other sites of the religious, cultural, historical importance for the Uyghur people. Banned use the Uyghur language in the school and even so many public space. Separating Uyghur children from the parents who are detained in the camp, indoctrinate to them to be loyalty to the Chinese Communist Party and forsake the Uyghur identity. Harassment and punishment, even Uyghur diaspora and anyone who dare speak out. Religions has been attacked, particularly for sin. For long, even the most basic expression of the religious identity has been criminalized through various legislation targeting Islam by Chinese authority have effectively criminalized growing long-bred Islamic dress, owning Quran, communicating with the friends about the religious religion on the online, or many other basic religious practice, forbidden Ramadan, forced to eat pork, forced to drink alcohol, etc. In the reality, it has become dangerous for practice Islam as those who attend the mosque or who show religious sentiment arrested and sent to concentration camps. As per report recently saying is, since 2017, more than 8,000 mosques completely destroyed, another 8,000 more partly destroyed. Chinese officials have described Islam as an ideological illness. It must be eradicated. Uyghurs around the world expected Muslim leaders to speak up for this atrocity. In October, 46 countries, including Muslim majority state, made statements supporting Chinese policy in the UN. How we have arrived at the point where Muslim world support the genocide and the persecution millions of Uyghur Muslims. I personally have a meeting OIC ambassador in Geneva 2018. We expressed the situation. Of course, this ambassador, she personally sympathized to the Uyghur issue, and she couldn't speak out because Islamic Organization Islamic Conference is not allowed, not involved in this case. Even they have made statement to support the Chinese policy towards the Uyghurs. We want to work to see or humanity demand China stop its genocide of the Uyghur Muslim. We have a right to live and exist, enjoy a basic right and celebrate a culture, religion, and ethnic identity. We demand that an organization that's supposed to represent it and interested of the Muslim majority world breaks its shameful silence of this genocide and help us end one of the most urgent crises in the world today. Finally, I would like to take your attention. Today, European Parliament, just a couple of hours ago, passed urgent resolution on the Uyghurs, and more than 30 Parliament members in the European Parliament speak on this. Then this urgent resolution approved by the European Parliament. I hope Organization of Islamic Conference also take action, stop to support the Chinese policy, and should be breaking the silence and support Uyghurs and help us to end this genocide. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Isa. I'd now like to welcome Rushan Abbas, founder and executive director for the Campaign for Uyghurs.
Thank you so much, Brother Yusuf. Salam alaikum to you all. I hope that you will hear what I have to say today with consideration. Remember that a true friend will speak truth even when it hurts. Should the value of the Ummah be lessened by political allegiance? The Uyghurs are being deliberately cut off by lack of support from Islamic countries. The Muslim community are also victims of China's massive campaign of lies. We despair for Muslims across the world. And as I try to warn them of the reality that they will be next, I am often met with hostility. China has a track record of buying and bullying. In reality, the Chinese regime is the enemy of all humanity. And the genocide of the Uyghurs is not China's internal issue, but it is a humanity issue. I can attest to this as my own sister has been abducted by the regime as retaliation for my advocacy for the Uyghurs. Look at how China's genocidal campaign is targeting the Muslims, as President Dolkun Esa just has explained. And wake up. This will not stop with the Uyghurs. Every area China's Belt and Road Initiative runs through leaves a trail of Muslim blood behind. Myanmar, the slaughter of the Rohingya Muslims, has been driven by China's Belt and Road Initiative. The conflicts has been fueled by China pressuring their leader to push out the Muslims in the area to make the way for the BRI. Remember our warnings. To the leaders in the Muslim world, I ask this. When an atheist regime that doesn't believe in any religion and which does not view others' lives as equally valuable is given economic control in your countries, do you think this will end well? Do you realize that China is already not only controlling your conscience and the freedom of expression, freedom of speech, but is actively expanding its authoritarian empire in your country as well? The OIC has allowed itself to comply with China's narrative. Many of the participating countries are directly complicit in the genocide by their participation in the Belt and Road Initiative, among the many other things. We must recognize that China has been waging a war on Islam. China's crimes against Islam are unprecedented and incomparable to any other atrocities in the recent history. The Chinese regime has declared that they must, astaghfirullah, to rewrite the Holy Quran on our Muslims' watch, and the whole Ummah is inactive. The Chinese regime is functioning as the most Islamophobia the country in the world, but hiding this image by paying for the construction of mosques in African nations. They wish to colonize. Nothing is free in life, and for the CCP, the cost will be as high for these nations as the human cost on the tragedy of the Uyghur Muslims has been. I urge the OIC to wake up before it's too late. Here are supplications, and do not let your guilt or the lust for the money to be counted as greater than the value of Muslims' lives. We thank countries like Turkey that spoke at the OIC meeting to express their concern, but we need more urgent action. Do not be stained by further complicity in the genocide and the colonial brutalities of China's bloodthirsty actions and ambitions. Please use your voice to cry out with us, not just to help us, the Uyghur Muslims, but also to help yourselves and to save your countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Abbas. Now I'd like to welcome Ms. Farida Deif, Director of Human Rights Watch in Canada and the organization's expert on the OIC.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you very much to the organizers for inviting me today. Human Rights Watch and other organizations have documented the Chinese government, how it subjected 13 million Muslims to mass surveillance, arbitrary detention, and collective punishment. Tearing down mosques, removing crescents from burial sites, confiscating prayer mats and Qur'ans, effectively outlawing the practice of Islam in Xinjiang. These actions are committed under the guise of combating extremism, a thinly veiled cover for the Chinese authorities' rampant Islamophobia and systematic human rights violations. This is a defining moment for the international community and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation in particular. After all, the OIC is the collective voice of Muslim governments around the world. How they choose to respond to the persecution of Uyghurs gets to the heart of the organization's legitimacy and institutional integrity. To date, the OIC has not only failed to condemn Beijing's assault on Islam, but it has shamefully praised China for its treatment of Muslims. This is nothing short of a dereliction of duty by an organization whose charter obliges it to safeguard the rights, dignity, religious and cultural identity of Muslims in non-Muslim countries. But to maintain and enhance its diplomatic and trade relations with China, the OIC abandoned its founding principles and undermined its core mandate. By applauding China, the OIC sent a dangerous message to governments around the world. The OIC betrayed not only Uyghurs, but Muslim minorities everywhere. It is evident that a country as globally influential as China sees no significant political cost to its abusive campaign against Muslims. The OIC as a whole and its members have the power, the mandate, and the responsibility to change this equation. The OIC should call on China to seize its campaign of repression and immediately close all the so-called political education camps. Given the scale and severity of abuses that await Uyghur and other Turkic Muslims in China, OIC member states should also pledge that they will not forcibly return any of these refugees and asylum seekers back to China. It's also crucial for OIC members to support action at the upcoming United Nations Human Rights Council to investigate these abuses. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Ms. Deef. I would now like to welcome Mr. Omar Kanat, Executive Director of Uyghur Human Rights Project.
You're muted, Brother Omar.
Okay. Good. Yeah, okay. Assalamu alaikum. Good morning and good evening. Greetings to brothers and sisters all over the world. Today's letter to the OIC has tremendous significance. Today, Muslim organizations from all over the world have come together in a united voice for the Uyghur people. We have been calling on the OIC to break its silence for more than 2 years. The OIC says it is the collective voice of the Muslim world. OIC's charter includes a commitment to safeguard, quote, the rights, dignity, and religious cultural identity of the Muslim communities and minorities in non-member states, unquote. Uyghurs and Kazakhs and other Turkic Muslims in East Turkistan have been abandoned by OIC. Why has it been silent on the all-out war on Islam by the Chinese government? The all-out war on our rights, dignity, religious and cultural identities. We are part of the Muslim world. Our history, language, and culture are embedded within Islam. Our music, literature, and philosophy are hailed as great Muslim achievements. A few voices of conscience have spoken over the past 2 years. Uyghurs will forever grateful to Masoud Ozil of Arsenal Football. He put China's war on Islam ahead of his own interests, and he has paid the price. Princess Hind Faisal Al-Qasimi of UAE set a beautiful example too. In a Ramadan greeting this year, she called for Chinese authorities to release Uyghurs and other Turkic Muslims detained in concentration camps since April 2017. She called on Muslims to, quote, stand together against this Muslim Holocaust that's happening in China, unquote. I thank our Muslim brothers and sisters at Youth Council of Muslim Organizations, Free Uyghur Now, and other organizations and individuals for their solidarity. We especially thank our brothers and sisters in Malaysia, Turkey, Indonesia, who are standing up for Uyghurs. Today, we see the power of collective action. We see the power of the unified voice of Muslim organizations around the world. Each one is a voice crying out for the whole Ummah. Their souls burn for justice for the Uyghurs. They have broken their silence. Now it is time for the OIC to respond. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kanat. With 10 minutes remaining before our Q&A session, I'd like to remind our guests and audience members to please submit their questions to the chat, which we will answer at the conclusion of our guest speaker remarks. I'd now like to introduce Justice for All's Save Uyghur campaign team lead, Surwi Hussain.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'm sorry. My team, Justice for All, recognized that this ongoing extensive human rights violation committed by Chinese government, which is directed towards my nation, Uyghurs, and other ethnic Turkic-speaking minorities who live in East Turkestan, meets the definition or the criteria of genocide as designated by United Nations Human Rights Council. Currently, as I'm talking to you, more than 3 million of my innocent fellow Uyghurs are suffering in so-called re-education centers or concentration camps and prisons in East Turkestan. They are innocent. They have not committed any crime. Currently, 2 of my family members, my nephew and my brother-in-law, were thrown into prison without any justifiable criminal background. And it has been more than 4 years for my husband and not to talk to anybody in his family. Yes, my nation is going through a genocide, a physical genocide. Our Qurans were burnt. Our mosques were demolished. Our innocent Uyghur girls, Muslim girls, are being forced to get married with atheist Han Chinese. Our innocent Uyghur children were separated from their parents and were put into state-run orphanages and being raised as Han Chinese. And our beloved prophet's name was dishonored in East Turkistan. Uyghur people are not allowed to give names such as Muhammad, Khadija, Aisha to their children. They are not even allowed to greet each other in Islamic way or say salam to each other. I don't understand why the majority of the Muslim world still turn a blind eye towards this ongoing Uyghur genocide. I would like to make our dear brothers and sisters in Islam remember one point. The Uyghur victims who are going through this genocide will hold all of you accountable on the day of judgment in Allah's court. As the co-writer of the letter to OIC, our team, Justice for All, would like to urge our brothers and sisters in Islam and Muslim countries to take a stand in this time of genocide and help our innocent Uyghur brothers and sisters and pressure Chinese government to release their innocent family members who are in captivity and pressure Chinese government to stop this genocide and stop this crime against the humanity. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ms. Hussein. I'd like to introduce the director of the Council on American Islamic Relations Government Affairs Department, Mr. Robert McCaw.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'm going to get right to the point. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation cannot be the collective voice that endeavors to safeguard and protect the interests of the Muslim world when it commends China for its concentration camps, places of untold suffering, torture, abuse, rape, and death for Uyghur Muslims and other ethnic Turkic minorities. CARE believes China's anti-Muslim policies, acts of cultural erasure, forced sterilization and abortion, forced marriage, child separation, and system of concentration camps meet the United Nations definition of genocide. We're urging the US government to adopt that definition. Many of these Uyghur Muslim detainees are forced into labor by the Chinese Communist Party as part of their so-called re-education program. And the OIC has made itself complicit in China's slave labor scheme by issuing statements that whitewash these human rights abuses. As OIC countries economically benefit from their ties to China and these forced labor programs, the United States has already adopted the Uyghur Human Rights Policy Act and started to block the imports of products produced by China's Uyghur slave labor. It's time for the OIC and OIC countries to catch up. The OIC continuing to applaud China under these circumstances is akin to aiding Germany in the 1930s as the Nazi regime began to round up its Jewish citizens prior to the Holocaust. OIC's actions have placed it on the wrong side of history. The OIC's indifference to Muslim suffering only further erodes its status as an Islamic body and further jeopardizes the rights and safety of Muslims living under these repressive and discriminatory conditions. The OIC must turn back from disobeying Allah to obeying Him. The OIC and its member states must stand firm with Muslims and for the honor of Islam. CARE supports the demands of today's press conference and the joint letter addressed to the OIC, and we thank the organizers for this effort. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. McCaw. I'd like to now introduce the National Deputy Director of the Muslim American Society, Sister Ismahan Abdullahi.
Jazakumullah khairan, Brother Ayub, and for all our speakers today. I am standing in solidarity and with our leaders today to demand accountability, specifically from the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Let us be clear. There is a genocide that is happening on our watch. And the world in the past has said, never again will this happen. Yet we see it unfolding for a very long time now. The ethnic cleansing of the Uyghur and Turkic groups by China is both outrageous and heartbreaking. We hear the stories that were told today and the personal stories, as well as countless more, and those who have been silenced by this oppression. The world sees the atrocity committed by China as millions of Uyghur Muslims are tortured, humiliated, and left to die in concentration camps. The world sees, yet many, including the OIC, remain silent, turning a blind eye to these crimes that are committed against humanity. So let the history books show. The OIC has not taken a bold and courageous stand as of yet, and there's still time to course correct. Because the history books would show those who were complicit in the genocide of men, women, and children, that whose only crime was professing the oneness of God and believing in Allah and his last messenger, peace be upon him. The world has failed our Uyghur brothers and sisters, and the OIC has failed in its fundamental task of putting their faith into action and upholding the Islamic principles that we have learned from our dear beloved Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and in the Quran. They have failed to stand against this genocide, preferring to line their pockets as opposed to standing firm against the genocide and the ethnic cleansing of the Uyghur Muslims. So we stand here today with our leaders virtually, and those who have been impacted by China's oppression, and all those who believe in the right to life, liberty, for all of God's creation. So we urge the international community to do more. We urge folks who are on the grounds here in America and elsewhere to follow the lead of those who have been impacted and who are serving, including some of the organizations that are mentioned here. And we urge the OIC to condemn this genocide, to stand on the right side of history, instead of being cowards in the face of persecution of our Muslim brethren. And as Mass, we co-sign to the demands listed in the letter, and we stand with our Uyghur brothers and sisters. And we pray for this oppression to be lifted, and we commit to doing more. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sister Ismahan. I'd like now to introduce the Executive Director of the Islamic Circle of North America's Council for Social Justice, Dr. Saeed Bukhari.
On behalf of ICNA Council for Social Justice, we fully endorse the letter, the demand for our Uyghur Muslims to OIC. ICNA Council for Social Justice has been doing different educational webinar with our Uyghur leaders, several webinars here in America, just to raise the voices, just to raise the education and awareness of this issue. So that is we endorse that letter, but I have one concern that probably we are knocking at a wrong door. I think it is a dead body. OIC is a dead body. So asking to awake that body, I'm not sure how much benefit we'll be getting. Yes, we have to do that. We have to make effort. No question about that. And I think we also met for under USCMO here, the OIC representative in New York, some other issues, and then we realized that they don't have any voice, they don't have any force, and OIC behavior whenever you are talking about any Muslim issues, whether it's the Uyghur, Kashmir, Indian Muslim, Rohingya, Palestine, their style is OIC. That's the long pause after that. So that is their response. They absolutely, unfortunately, they don't care about Muslim issues. But I understand we have to knock at the door, we have to recognize them. We have to tell them that this is their role they have to play. But I will also suggest, in just a very last comment, that I think there is a need. 35% Muslims all over the globe, 1.8 billion Muslims, 35%, they are living in Muslim as a minority. So there must be an other organization of these Muslim minorities groups and Muslim minorities population. USCMO has initiated a process, and we are in the phase of almost final phase of forming a Western Muslim organizations network, their platform. But I think it should be increased. We should have our own platform wherever Muslims living as a minority, and they are facing a lot of problems. And that formation, that is maybe council or whatever name we suggest, they should have a seat in OIC. They should have a seat in European Union. They should have a seat or a recognition at UN level and all other level to present all those demands, and then presenting them in a forceful way that these Muslims are facing, and this is their demand. So again, for these efforts, we really commend all those, our USCMO leadership, all this global Uyghur Muslim organizations leadership. We commend all those efforts what we are making. We are fully with them. We are fully endorsing them. Whatever, if you ask us, ICNA Council for Social Justice, we are ready to do in coming month and year, inshallah ta'ala. But I think we should also think about long-term also, that how to make Muslim minority voices more strong in the world. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, Dr. Bukhari. Now, the chairman of American Muslims for Palestine, Dr. Hatem Bazian.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Let me first remind ourselves of Article 2 of the Convention on Genocide, which has killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of the calculation to bring about the physical destruction, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, forcefully transferring children of the group to another group. So if we look at the Convention on Genocide that was adopted in 1951, after the atrocities of the Second World War, we could see that China is engaged in a systematic genocide against the Uyghur people. But more importantly, Article 3 of the Convention on Genocide, on item E, it actually is punishable having complicity in genocide. And there where I would put the OIC is derelict in its responsibility as a signatory to the Convention on Genocide, considering that Muslim states are signatories to the Convention of Genocide. Now, we need to understand that such international conventions is not only the individual country that is responsible in terms of the acts of genocide, but all the signatories are also responsible to intervene to prevent acts of genocide. Therefore, OIC should take its responsibility seriously as signatories collectively to the Convention of Genocide and stop their complicity in trying to continue to have relations with China, economic, trade, and otherwise, in order not to actually take China to a task in its treatments of the Uyghur population. Lastly, I would say that the OIC is becoming almost a participant in the promotion of various aspects of Islamophobia, because what we are experiencing in relations to the Uyghur population is Islamophobia in the sense of treating the Muslims as targeted groups because of certain elements of what I consider to be Islamophobic social imaginary that is being acted upon by the state. So I'm in full support of the statements that is issued to call on the OIC to take its responsibility and to act as a representative of 55 Muslim majority countries, which is the second largest bloc of countries in the United Nations. If we don't act, then we can't really only say that we're in solidarity without mobilizing our force and our efforts to bring an end to an unfolding genocide in front of us. It's not a theory, it actually is unfolding systematically as we speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hatem. We are only a few short minutes away from our Q&A session. I'd like to remind our distinguished guests in the audience to please submit your questions for discussion after our guest speakers conclude speaking. Now I'd like to introduce the Nikubur Rahman of the Muslim Ummah of North America.
Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. What is going on in Uyghur, China, in Xinjiang province is unprecedented. More than 1 million Muslim population has been taken into concentration camp, which they try to call re-education camp, and all their human rights have been violated. The world is not doing its part. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in a hadith that Muslims are like one body. If a part of the body feels a pain, the whole body should feel the pain. Unfortunately, OIC is taking a back seat. It's not doing anything. There is a clear genocide going on in China towards Uyghur population. I would like to thank the organizers, and Muslim Ummah of North America stands by and co-signs the historic declaration and letter. We hope Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to take proper initiative so that we can reduce the sufferings of our brothers and sisters from Uyghur population. Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rahman. Now I would like to introduce remarks from Engin Uruglu, a member of the European Parliament, who sits on the Committee of Foreign Affairs. His remarks will be read by Persia Safi, an Uyghur student at the University of Lübeck in Germany.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Perisa Safi. I'm Uyghur living in Germany, and I will present the statements today for you by Engin Eroglu. For several years now, the Chinese government has systematically carried out its crackdown on expression of cultural, religious, and political diversity against the Uyghur minority in Xinjiang. Yet, all too many people are still surprised when confronted with the mounting evidence of these human rights violations, which are part of a targeted campaign at diminishing the Uyghur population. We must recognize that what is happening in Xinjiang goes beyond ordinary human rights violations and represents the largest scale enslavement of human rights violations in the world. State-induced and targeted birth prevention to reduce the population in the region meets the criteria of genocide as set out by the UN Genocide Convention. Uyghurs are suffering from modern-day slavery, and the world is watching. The international community must stop turning a blind eye on China's gross human rights violations. We require collective global responses to the Chinese government's reckless behavior. Taking a clear stance and calling out these crimes as what they are is essential for this to end. Intergovernmental institutions such as the UN and the OIC also have an obligation to take a clear stance, demanding transparency as well as justice regarding these auspicious human rights violations. This includes partners and allies from Muslim countries. As the second largest intergovernmental organization worldwide and the collective voice of Muslims, it is important to show support and solidarity with the Uyghur Muslim brothers and sisters. Starting a dialogue with states where Uyghurs are at risk of deportation, and to prevent such deportations from occurring, it is crucial to sending a clear signal to President Xi to show that we are not internally divided on these issues. To this end, we must stand together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Safi. I'd like to now introduce our final speaker, Mr. Samir Fallah, of the Council of the Council of European Muslims.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah again. Thank you to the USCMO for this important initiative. On behalf of the Council of European Muslims, we are signatories of this open letter to the OIC. We are a European umbrella organization with several member organizations in over 22 EU countries. The tragedy of the Uyghur peoples is one of the great tragedies of today. Many of the international communities stand behind the Uyghur people and support their cause. In Europe, famous footballers like Özil and Griezmann has expressed their support for the Uyghur people. We have come here today to appeal to the OIC countries to break the silence, to put an end to this crisis, to this tragedy, so that the Uyghur people can live a normal life in freedom and dignity. We are here today to urge the Chinese government to respect human rights, to say the Chinese government stop this tragedy, stop the genocide, let the Uyghur people live freely, give them their rights. We have come here today to remember the forgotten Uyghur people. We have come here today to remember that we stand together for justice and freedom. May Allah help the Uyghur people, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fallah. I'm pleased to see that we are running on schedule, and we will now be proceeding to the question and answer portion of this press conference. I'd now like to turn it over to the Secretary General of the U.S. Council of Muslim Organizations, Mr. Usama Jamal.
Thank you, Ayub, for moderating the session. I want to thank all the speakers, all the guests here who shared with us their support, being here, voicing their concern over the silence and inactions of the OIC. This is truly a remarkable day for over 140 organizations and representatives from around the world endorsing this letter, this open letter to the OIC. We will deliver this letter to the permanent observer of the OIC at the United Nations, and making sure that this letter will be sent to the OIC headquarters, and that they let them know that Muslims' view of their inaction. There are a few questions here that came to our panel that we're trying to answer those questions in the best way that we can. Some of the questions they would like to know about the list of the signatories, and we will publish the list of the letter, which include all the signatories to the letter, so that people can see that, and we will share that with all those who signed up with register with our press conference, and will be also on different websites, including USCMO and the Free Uyghurs Now. There was a question, and they were asking, one question says, I'm interested in knowing how many groups signed the letter. So we have that, and we will tell them it's about 140 and still counting. The other question is, how do we convince family members, especially immigrant family members, who are afraid to say something because they believe that China is imperative for the financial stability of their native country? It is unfortunately, when we start talking about the interest, we should always talk about the principles. The principles here is human rights. rights that God has given to everyone to live freely, to believe freely, to be equal. And therefore, this takes precedence over any interest that we may have. And that's exactly the situation of the OIC and its member countries, that they have looked at their interests. They did not look at the best interest of the Uyghurs people who are under the gun, who are suffering on a daily basis. So I think we should voice our concern. We should voice our protest against such behavior, such treatment of the Uyghurs. Regardless, China will need the economic trade with every country as much as these countries need the economic trade with China. It is a two-way street. It is not one-way street. If those countries stop their trade with China, China has nothing but to comply with the international law, with the international demands that they need to treat their people fairly. And therefore, I would say that there should be no fear, no concern by anyone to take a stand. After all, we live by our principles more than we live by our stomachs. There's another question. This particular question is what actions exactly we are looking for? Can we ensure that the actions are taken and we do not just receive lip service? Very legitimate question. I believe that we do need to follow up on this particular press conference with all the speakers, with all the organizations who signed on this one, with actions. And that action, the first action, which take me to the second question in the same level here, is that not much is known in the media about the plight of the Uyghur other than some social media between some groups. And they are absolutely right. So I think we need to publicize the issue of the Uyghurs around the world, use every medium that we can have. We need to pressure all the television stations, all the network of media to have stories about the Uyghurs' plight in China. We have to push our politicians, our elected officials, whether members of Congress in the US, members of the parliament in UK, in Europe, the European Union, the United Nations, everywhere, that they should pay attention to the plight and to the suffering of the Uyghurs people as much as we are putting on OIC. Most of us live in Western countries. We are citizens. We have right with our elected officials to respond to their constituents. And this is something that very important for us, and that is the human rights. We talk about human rights everywhere, and the Uyghurs' right is one of those human rights that we all should pay attention to. So I think the actions, we will follow up with OIC through their representatives at the United Nations. We should also send those letters to member countries and remind them that they have an obligation. And whether they take actions or not, we are taking action. We are raising that voice, and we are following up with our commitment. And at the end, we will be asked about our actions, but not the actions of others. So we will make sure that we make that commitment among ourselves, among our allies, that they will do that job and they will deliver that message to every countries at the OIC. That's our priority. And then the rest of the world comes next. And there was a question about how can we hold companies responsible? For example, the Mulan movie put on the Disney Plus platform garnered a serious backlash for its shooting in Xinjiang and praising the local government. And currently India, is there no legal pathways in the US or anywhere else that can help ban such promotion, or at the very least have some significant curb? little like Twitter's recent efforts to flag US election misinformation. Of course, public demand, public pressure can yield to some results. And again, we have to use every means available to us that we can deliver this message to our elected officials, to the companies, to the media, similar to this effort. And that's why I'm very, very pleased with the effort of our young people. If we can do this, then we can bombard Facebook, Twitters with the demand that they should flag anything about China and their mistreatment of Uyghurs. Also, they should endorse and they should allow and should, support any information that talks about the Uyghurs' plight that can be shared around the social media. But also, most importantly, we can talk about the companies that deal with China or the Chinese companies that we should send them letters. It is as simple as sending a letter. It should not be a difficult task to do. By no means that I'm listing each and every possible ways to respond. We're just making some of those suggestions. But I think the best way is to continue to have in progress committees that would continue to develop and explore ways to put the pressure on the Chinese government, on the OIC, and on the rest of the world to rescue the Uyghurs and to keep their case alive until a solution is made available to them. So there will be many ways, and I think this effort can be expanded to include other measures that we can support. Again, most of those questions about how can we spread those messages around the world. And just as we said, we all have a task, we all have a responsibility, and we should be doing that. I may ask any of the panelists here if they would like to, answer one of those questions so that I make sure that I'm not the only one who is crafting all the responses that can possibly be made. I would like to ask the organizers themselves if they have anything that they can share with us about a follow-up to this effort that they have made today. Do they plan on other things? And I just want to take this opportunity and rest them assured that USCMO, and I'm sure also the Council of European Muslims, my dear brother Samir Falah, will support also a similar effort for all of our youth to continue this effort. So do you have anything that you would like to say?
Yes, can I say? May I?
Yes, Brother Omar.
Yeah, about this economic impact to the people who will speak out. So I want just to comment on that. So Uyghurs do not oppose trading relations between Muslim majority countries in China. However, the trade should not buy indifference to egregious human rights abuses, Chinese repression against Uyghur people. It should not buy complicity in China's assault on Uyghurs. As in the case of one OIC member, for example, Egypt, for example, in 2017, Egyptian intelligence services rounded up several Uyghur students and deported them back to China at China's request. At least 2 of those students died in custody. So I think the further silence from the OIC in Muslim majority countries will invite allegations of complicity with Chinese authorities in its repression of the Uyghur people, and history will judge these actions with limited understanding. So OIC has a responsibility to respond it has a moral responsibility, legal responsibility to respond to this atrocities, to this war on Islam in China. Chinese government's actions to destroy the Islamic culture. So that's what the Chinese government is doing, is to destroy a part of the Muslim world, a part of the Muslim culture and history. So Islamic OIC, Islamic Cooperation Organization, should stand up, at least, approach China and tell China how the Muslim world is being insulted by what the Chinese government is doing to the Uyghur people. Thank you.
Thank you. Any response? I have a question for Brother Samir Faleh. It says, what has the Council of European Muslims done so far on the Uyghurs genocide, and what are the future plans? Unmute yourself. Okay, go ahead. Yes.
إذا ممكن أنا أعطي بالعربي شوية وبعد ترجم لأنه ما...
Okay, that's fine.
احنا في تعاون، هناك عندنا مؤسسات حقوقية لإخواننا المسلمين الأوغور، واحنا نتعاون معهم في برامج حقوقية وفي برامج سياسية وفي برامج إغاثية، وننسق معهم حتى نعرف بقضيتهم. وفي أوروبا مواقف إلى حد الآن مواقف جيدة من الناحية السياسية، وفي من ناحية المسلمين أيضا تعاون جيد لدعم هذه القضية. هذا ما يمكن أن أفيد به في هذا السؤال.
The brother just said that in Europe, they are in close relationship with the Uyghurs organizations, and they are cooperating on legal, political, social, and humanitarian aspects. And they are making some progress in Europe, and they are pushing their organizations to cooperate as well and to advance this issue and to introduce it to the societies and the countries that they are in there, to so that the people understand the issue of the Uyghurs in China. And so that is going on, and they will hope to continue doing that. Back to the free Uyghurs now. And by the way, since I have some of my brothers and sisters, is it Uyghurs? Is it Uyghurs? Sometimes we feel like, are we pronouncing it right? So what is the right, pronunciation?
The right pronunciation is Uyghur.
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 Okay.
It should be also spelled as U-Y-G-H-U-R.
Okay.
Not U-I-G-H-U-R. So the correct spelling also U-Y-G-H-U-R. So if you spell like that, and you can read that as Uyghur.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do I have a consent of every other brother and sister from the Uyghurs that this is the way that we should do it? Because sometimes here, some of us, they say, no, it is Uyghurs, it's not Uyghurs, and so on. Okay, I want to make sure that we do it right and we do not offend anyone by mispronouncing. Back to that group. Do you have anything that you want to share and update us? Amal.
Yes, thank you everyone again for your presence. We are very, very grateful, and we want to thank Campaign for Uyghurs, Justice for All, Uyghur Human Rights Project, USCMO, and all the speakers and all the co-sponsors. Just to add for the people asking for actions to take, so Free Uyghur Now is a student-led, it is a youth-led coalition. We are at 15 countries, 75 universities. And so the idea is to unite in through social media, unite through these campaigns, through these actions together, and then have a powerful voice to speak out and to prove that Muslims are with Uyghurs, and to prove that human beings are with Uyghurs, and this is genocide. So for actionable steps, we actually have tomorrow a Solidarity Day, a social media campaign where people can sign a change.org, which is basically adapted from our letter that we all signed. So the change.org is open for everyone, Muslims and allies, to sign on. So please sign on that. to show the solidarity and hopefully thousands and thousands of people agreeing to the demands to the OIC. There are also our political duty of contacting our representatives. There are bills currently right now that should be passed hopefully in the Senate, but we just need that continuous pressure on our representatives. And beyond that, boycotting the companies that are complicit in forced Uyghur labor. So there's a lot that we can do as individuals beyond the solidarity of actual action steps. The only thing that we ask of everyone here is to unite together for the purpose of freeing our Uyghur brothers and sisters. Again, thank you everyone so much. And Tasneem, please feel free to jump in if I missed everything.
I think you said everything perfectly, Emin. For somebody asking in the chat, the petition is on our Instagram at Free Uyghur Now. And to just add on to what Emil has said, what you can really do about the situation is really start the conversation about what's going on. A lot of the Uyghur activists here today that just spoke have been doing this work for years, have been speaking out for years, and asking people to listen and to mobilize on their behalf. So the first thing that you can really do is listen to what they have to say, amplify their voices. There's also a lot of Uyghur stories that are just not in the public, a lot of people that cannot speak up. And there are millions of people in the situation, actually. So that's the first thing that you can do, really educate yourself, start speaking to your family, to your loved ones, to your friends, to your peers, start talking about the Uyghurs, because like a lot of people said today, it is genocide, it constitutes genocide. And the fact that there is a genocide on this large scale and not a lot of people know about is very, very disappointing. The last thing that I want to do is for the young people that are on this Zoom call, we have an Instagram at Free Uyghur Now where we always post action items and educational materials to try to break this down for a younger audience. We also have a lot of organizations that we work with that have helped organize this effort and have amazing efforts of their own. We also follow them on Instagram. But for example, Save Uyghur Now, Justice for All always has different campaigns that people can partake in, Twitter storms, all of these things that need people to partake in. Campaign for Uyghurs as well always has action items, World Uyghur Congress, and Uyghur Human Rights projects as well. So these are all amazing organizations that you can follow, learn from, talk to. They're very, very responsive and help. So that's really all I had to say. I think Emma covered it all, but I don't know if there's more questions in the chat, but I'll pass this back off to Brother Usama.
Thank you, Tasneem, and thank you, Emil, and thank you everyone on this panel. And thanks to all those who are still with us on this. I think we came now to the end of this press conference. We appreciate all your efforts. I think we still have a lot of work to do, and the work would never stop. And inshallah, we would be there. The U.S. Council of Muslim Organizations committed to support every issue of our Muslim Ummah and every human rights and civil rights, whether it is in the United States, whether it is overseas, whether it is in Europe. I think humanity is the same, spells the same. We are all one. And therefore, we will continue to be truthful to our principles. Thank you all. Jazakumullah khairan. We appreciate your time. And hopefully we see you again on a good announcement of the free of the Uyghurs people, inshallah. Thank you.
Inshallah. Thank you so much. Thank you.